3-5. All right. Things are causing problems in here today, and I'm thinking I fixed them, and I'm not sure what's happening. But 35192, when I sent a text, I was reading a story this morning about, remember Roger Moore? He was one of the guys that played James Bond.
Yeah.
I'm a Gen Xer, so I came of age during the Roger Moore era of James Bond movies, and I've always been a sucker for those movies. I didn't really care who was playing James Bond, and I'm still not quite sure why I enjoy those movies so much.
They're just fun. They're silly. But it's like a fun adventure.
Yeah, the Daniel Craig ones got to be kind of more heavy duty, but, back in the day when it was Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan, the gentleman spy, right? Mm-hmm. He was just kind of more, hello, ladies, one of those. He wasn't kicking dudes' asses.
I mean,
Daniel Craig was. There were fights, but it wasn't.
Fights, but the way the fights evolve over the years from the Sean Connery ones where they're just slobber knockers and like wrestling more than choreographed fights. Like there's just like the old, probably the first 2 or 3 James Bond movies with
Sean Connery.
Sean Connery. Yeah. Literally they're not even really throwing punches. They're just like throwing each other around. They're really like boring fights.
Well, I remember because Sean Connery had come back to play James Bond in the early 80s. He came back and there was a movie called Never Say Never Again. And it was another one shot with him coming back to play James Bond. And it was based on Thunderball, which they had already made, I think.
Yeah.
But he came back and played it. But when I was a kid, I was watching the Roger Moore ones. So I was watching The Spy Who Loved Me, and I was watching frigging Moonraker. I saw that movie a billion times because it was on in like the early days of HBO, which we didn't have. But when I would go to my grandmother's house, she had cable. We didn't have cable. And so when I go to my grandmother's, like in the summer or whatever, she'd go to bed at 8 o'clock, and I'm up all night watching HBO. And Moonraker was on all the time. So I loved the Roger Moore James Bond movies.
Timothy Dalton was the first one that I remember.
Okay.
Because he was...
The Living Daylights.
Yeah,
those were good too.
What was the... License to Kill.
License to Kill. View to a Kill. Was
that
him?
I thought it was License to Kill.
You might be right.
But I just remember wanting to rent that one, and my grandma was like, no. And I'm still kind of mad at her. Because I wanted to watch that.
View to a Kill was the last Roger Moore one, I think. Because he did For Your Eyes Only. He did The Spy Who Loved Me. He did Live and Let Die. Which was very controversial because Live and Let Die, he's in bed with black girls.
Yeah.
And even in the early 70s, when Mormons went to go see that movie, their heads exploded. They couldn't get there.
No, they're like, but just don't let them in the church.
Right. And then, of course, he did a movie called Octopussy.
Yeah,
very
subtle.
All of the social mores, by the way, in any given time, they seem to be set aside for James Bond franchise movies. And I'm not sure why, but there was a movie in the early 80s called Octopussy, and that was the woman's name in the movie. She was I think the female lead. And Roger Moore died probably 7 or 8 years ago, but I was reading that his grave had been vandalized. And they're not quite sure why or who or how. He's buried on a hilltop in Monaco. Very James Bond of him, by the way. Before he was James Bond, people knew, a lot of times they would grab somebody who was relatively unknown to play James Bond. People knew Roger Moore already because he had been in a franchise called The Saint. It's a movie that they tried to remake with Val Kilmer. You ever see that? It was just
I remember that one.
It was a mess. But the character, Simon Templar, was a guy that Roger Moore had played. So a lot of people of that era knew him playing the Saint. I didn't know that. I only knew him as James Bond. And when he was in the Cannonball Run, he was in those movies too. He would do James Bond movies, but in between, he'd be doing stuff like Cannonball Run. I think he was a priest in the Cannonball Run or something. But I loved seeing him in those movies. And he'd been married a bunch of times, and, he was a relatively right-wing guy in real life, but he was a good actor. I liked him a lot in stuff. And he was, that movie Moonraker I was referring to, of course, the bad guy was an actor named Richard Kyle. And his character was called Jaws because he had these silver sharp teeth, right? Moonraker was the one in space. They were raking the moon. I assume that's what it was. But Richard Kyle was also the big guy in Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
The really weird-looking guy. That was kind of Adam Sandler's nod to that actor and that character. But Roger Moore had played the Saint. They gave him a little cameo in that Val Kilmer movie, too. I think that was probably the last one he did before he died. But, or it was a TV show that they had rebooted. The Kilmer one was the early 90s, I think. Anyway, somebody vandalized Roger Moore's grave, which is this big marble thing on a hilltop in Monaco, and it has the family crest. It has the Moore family crest on it, and it was pried off. Somebody took photos of it. It was pried off of his, you can see the glue marks, and I don't know what they used, probably a crowbar. But if something like that shows up on eBay or at Sotheby's, then they're going to know what happened. I mean, he's buried there with, I think, other people or family members or members of his family. I mean, hence the crest. So I don't know. I mean, for a guy who played James Bond to be buried in Monaco, you figure you traveled a lot playing that character. So you probably found yourself falling in love with all kinds of places around the world because they would shoot on location. And a small cemetery in La Jolla, Monaco, if I'm pronouncing La Jolla properly. I don't know. And somebody pried off the Moore family crest. Do the Squires have a family crest?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I don't think so. There probably was at some point because English.
Yep.
Like we're very British.
Yep.
Of that descent, but I've never seen it, never been shown it.
Yeah.
Not anything that they passed down that I'm aware of.
Yeah. When I was a kid, we had a family crest because when I was young, we could only afford one tube of toothpaste.
All right, you're moving more into your garbage mood.
I'm moving you more into a garbage mood. Yeah.
With jokes like that.
Well, you had the funny bus last night.
I did have the funny bus last
with
night.
Bridget. I saw Bridget posted a video and looked like she was having fun. Yeah,
we
looked
had
like a good
blast.
time.
So I get there, and I'm going to keep this person kind of anonymous because I don't want them to get in trouble.
Kind of anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I get there, and someone comes up to me like, "Hey, Bill, I'm excited for the bus ride tonight. Is Mary coming?" And I was like, "No, but Bridget's coming." And he's like, "Does Bridget have?" And then he like holds his hands out like big boobs.
jugs. Yeah,
like because Mary does, and every time I see her, I'm like,
she does.
That's what he was saying. I'm just repeating what he's saying.
I haven't really paid attention to Mary's jugs.
And he's like, every time I see Mary, I'm just like, I need to stock up on Fruit Loops because of those milkers.
Boy,
and I just was like,
this wasn't Ray, was it?
no.
Okay.
No, it was not
Ray.
It's not anybody, but it is somebody. But I'm just keeping them. I don't want to get
Partially anonymous.
Yeah. And just going on, I was like, well, Bridget's got. I think she's got boobs, but I don't. But I also was shocked at him thinking that Mary's got these gigantic boobs when they're just pretty regular, like nothing wrong with them. But he was just going on and on about how much he needs Fruit Loops.
This was a guy,
boobs.
Just to clarify, set the scene here. This was a guy at Collision Bend, or this was a guy on the bus?
This is a guy at Collision Bend that went on the bus.
Gotcha.
Yes. And he's just going on and on about Mary's boobs and how much what a big fan of Mary's boobs he is. And then we got on the bus, and Darjan was great, very funny. My microphone worked this time, so I got to chime in a bunch. And then
did it not? It didn't work last time.
It didn't work last time I was on, which was fine. We still had a great time, but this time it worked, and we, just bantering back and forth. And I've been on the tour enough times that I'd set him up for things. I'm like, oh, what's that statue over there? And be like, oh, that's Jesse Owens, that kind of thing. And then after we did the break, halfway through we stop at Flatiron, and then it became like the karaoke bus, which was really fun.
Well, Darjan plays a lot of music.
He plays a lot of
on
music,
his bus.
and he's a trained actor and singer and stuff like that. So he's got chops in that stuff. So he sings a song, and then my girlfriend sings a song, and then Bridget sing. And like when my girlfriend's saying she's saying Alicia Keys, and just crushed it.
Yeah.
And that was really fun. And then Bridget did TLC. Is that right?
No Scrubs?
Salt and Pepper. One of those.
Oh, Salt and Pepper. Push It.
What was it? I have. Hold on. Let me pull it up here because I have video of her doing it. There we go.
What a Man?
Yeah.
It sounds like What a Man.
Yeah. But she threw a little Hawk 2 in there, which is good. Yeah, Bridget had a very good time. Yeah, Shoop, that's what it was.
Shoop is what it was.
Shoop is what it was.
Yeah.
And then we went and did my East End High and Dry, and Bridget got so mad because we do a contest at East End on Wednesdays where people write jokes during the show, and people were reading their jokes off of their phones or their notes that they had. And Bridget was sitting up front, and she's got her arms crossed, and she's like, the jokes were funny, but you should be professional and not use notes. And it was...
Was she pretty lit up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So she'd be hungover today if she were in here.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, everybody's like, well, they're just, it's a bar show, and it's not
She
that
was
big a deal.
chastising you.
Not even me, but the comics, and she's like, this is what I take this serious. Like, well, we appreciate that you take it so serious, and you're very good at your job. These comics had to read their jokes off of off of their notes, and it,
Gotcha.
But it was
She was
just
taking
funny.
umbrage as another public speaker.
Right, and it was just so funny how how turned off by that she was. And then we kept the party going. Went to the Barley House for Spin Fest.
Yeah, she was judging something there.
She was judging the DJ competition. And she's like, oh, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. And then we get there. And it doesn't start for another 45 minutes after we get there. It starts around like 11 o'clock. And says like, see why I wasn't worried? And she's like, yeah, I know. I get it. And me and my girl hung out till about midnight. And then we were out. And but Bridget she still had to judge. So she I think closed the bar down. But we had a blast. They had the scroll going on the screen where if you hashtagged it BH Spinfest
at the Barley House,
whatever you tweeted would show up. So I was like, oh, I'm voting for DJ Tanner, dumb crap like that. And then people on my Twitter noticed that this was happening. So then other people that are just like friends with me or follow me started using the hashtag and started sending some pretty unhinged things and boobs and stuff like that. And then
to the screen
because even though they weren't there, they're like,
it's like in a Cavs game.
Use this hashtag, and because they had no filter on it either.
Right.
So like, Tommy put her boobs up on there, and it was pretty funny.
What driver did you have on the funny bus?
Rick, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Why?
Huh? Oh, I was just curious.
Yeah, Rick's a fun dude.
Okay.
What is it? Rick and John? Those are the two drivers?
John, yeah, there's a third guy too, I think.
Okay.
Yep. But sometimes those guys get wild.
Yeah, they're good. It was a good time.
All right.
And all the people that came on, I think there was a lady named Wendy. She got up and sang what did she sing? Gladys Knight.
Okay.
Georgia, Midnight Train
the
to Georgia.
Night? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And the Pips.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a wild time.
You can't have Gladys Knight without Pips.
I was very happy with the way everything went, and it's a bummer that we're done with the Funny Bus for the year.
Well, you can still go on the Funny Bus. You go to funnybus.net, and you can schedule a tour for yourself. You can schedule private tours, whatever it is. But, yeah, it's a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll be doing it next spring.
Yeah. It was
I can't imagine because I don't think it's part of the general route anyway on the Funny Bus, but I was curious if they were going to kind of sneak past where they were shooting Superman.
Well, we couldn't. Everything was closed over there, so we kind of took a little bit of a different route around Public Square, and it wasn't, it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't get to see where they're shooting, really, though.
Right. Well, it's pretty late. I don't know how late into the evening they're shooting, but, I mean, Wendell Pierce, if people know who that actor is. Wendell Pierce, he was on The Wire back in the day. He's on a show on CBS now called Elsbeth, but he's been in a whole lot of things. And they cast him to play Perry White in this Superman movie. And apparently he was in town because he was posting a tweet extolling, he was writing a glowing review of Cleveland.
Oh, thanks.
When you visit Cleveland, you must visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's reason enough to schedule a trip to the city. Caught a jazz set at the Bop Spot, which I didn't even realize was still
Bop
open.
Stop.
He called it Spot. That's what I thought. I thought it was Bop Stop, too.
I believe it's Bop Stop.
And he went to Angie's for soul food. Loving this Great Lake jewel is what he wrote.
Well, thank you.
So I didn't even, I guess I hadn't thought about it, but that must mean that he's in town, too. They're shooting Daily Planet scenes over there on Superior.
Have you seen David Cornsweet as Clark Kent? Those photos?
No, I haven't seen. I haven't really kept.
He's
I
really
saw
got
that,
the broccoli boy hair going.
Yeah, I caught when we were over there a week or so ago, checking out something over at the library. They were still putting up all the fake facades. They were like getting the set put together. But I haven't seen anybody over there since they got to town and actually started shooting. But again, they close that area off.
Yeah,
they give it a pretty wide berth. Yeah.
Which is why, we had to switch up the route a little bit, but not too much.
Bill Cobbs is an actor you might know, too. He passed away. He's a guy who had a very familiar face. He was in Night at the Museum and Air Bud, and he died at 90. But he's from Cleveland, Ohio, which I didn't realize. He's one of these guys that you instantly recognize because he would show up as, like, the wise old. I feel like this guy's been old forever. He was on the Drew Carey Show, and he just did.
When you're 90, you've been old for a long time.
Yeah, I guess you've been old for 40 years.
What age do you consider someone old?
I think
when you're a kid, you see someone that's 60, you're like, that's an old person, and then they live for 30 more years.
Well, when you're a kid, somebody who's 30 is old,
right? So exactly. So a guy like that, who you probably saw in the first thing you saw him in when you were 10,
yeah,
and then he still lived another 40 years. You're like, oh,
yeah,
pretty old guy.
Yep, died of natural causes, hit by a truck,
decapitated.
He was in. He just kept working all the way to 90. He was Whitney Houston's manager in The Bodyguard, and he was the jazz pianist in That Thing You Do, and he was the guy who builds the Tin Woodsman in the Sam Raimi Oz movie. He was in Air Bud and the Drew Carey Show. He's just worked all the time. It's got to be great to be an actor at that age. But I had no idea he was from Cleveland.
Yeah, I only saw that because of the I'm from Cleveland Instagram account.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I was reading an obit, and they referred to him as a Cleveland native. He went to East Tech High School. Is that still a high school?
I don't know.
East Tech. And then he served in the Air Force, where he became a stand-up comedian. And then he worked for IBM and sold cars before he started an acting career on doing theater. He worked at Cleveland Theaters, and then he joined the Negro Ensemble Company in New York. That's how old this guy was. And he just never, I don't know if he stopped working some time ago, but boy, you'd see him in just so many movies. He's in A Mighty Wind and Demolition Man, and and you just pop in, and most people probably recognize him from Night at the Museum, but did a lot of work. But Bill Cobbs from Cleveland.